God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask you for pardon of my sins and grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Well, my favorite ancient philosopher, Aristotle, he was a great observer of nature, of the skies, as in the planets and the stars, of the animals, plants, everything. He was a tremendous observer. And looking at the planets moving across the sky at night, are the plants growing and blossoming like they do at this time of year, are the birds building their nests, he realized they all have one thing in common, and that is that they are all motivated. They have a motive, which really means they have something that moves them. The way he put this was, nothing is moved at random, but there must always be something present to move it. And that mover is the motive. If there was no motive, the planets would just stop moving in the sky. The plants would, I suppose, shrivel up and die. The birds would just sit in the trees and not bother with their nests. And the animals, for example, wouldn't go out hunting. What about us, you and me? Well, we are the same and we are different. We're the same and we all feel this at times. If we don't have a motivation, for example, feeling a bit low or a bit depressed, it's even actually physically hard to move. We lack motivation. You contrast that when we are highly motivated, or we know somebody who's really a very motivated person. They're always on the move. You can't stop them. But we're also different in that, unlike the planets and the plants and the birds and the animals, we can choose what will motivate us. The birds, for example, can't change their motivation. They can't say at this time in spring, they can, oh, well, this year I just forego the nest building thing just for this year. They can't do that. Now, today's gospel is all about motivation. We see in it some very motivated people. After Jesus had fed the 5,000, his disciples saw him walking in the water. Next day, the crowd that had stayed on the other side saw that only one boat had been there, and that Jesus had not got into the boat with his disciples, but that the disciples had set off by themselves. Other boats, however, had put in from Tiberias near the place where the bread had been eaten. When the people saw that neither Jesus nor his disciples were there, they got into those boats and crossed to Capernaum to look for Jesus. When they found him on the other side, they said to him, "Rabbi, when did you come here?" So these are very motivated in their search for Jesus. These people commandeer these boats. They travel perhaps even miles over the lake to get to the other side of the lake where Jesus is. We can see them almost sprinting up the other shore to catch up with Jesus. So literally they are very motivated. But what is it that is motivating them? It's not enough just to be motivated. And Jesus brings this up with them when he says to them, kind of maybe something that they weren't expecting to hear. I tell you most solemnly, you are not looking for me because you have seen the signs, but because you have had all the bread you wanted to eat. So this episode takes place just after one of those miraculous multiplications of loaves and fishes, the 5,000 fed with this, we can imagine, really beautiful bread. And they get all excited, not by Jesus himself, but by the bread that Jesus can bring them. And that's it. They loved their bread. They want more bread. That's what motivates them. Nothing higher than that. They want you, Jesus, for the bread you can give them. We could ask ourselves then, what motivates me? I mean, what really motivates me? Because we might say, oh, Jesus motivates me, or being good motivates me. But these people racing across the lake, if you'd stop them in their boat and say, well, what are you searching for? They would say, oh, Jesus of Nazareth. But if you were to say, what really motivates you? What are you really searching for? Be sincere. And they would just have to say, bread. Nice, freshly baked bread. And that's it. Nothing more. Now, in the gospel, Jesus forces them to really consider this. He forces them to examine their motivation. And really, we have to do the same. It's a very important thing for us to do. In a certain sense, it's the most important thing for us to do. Examine sincerely, deeply, my motivation. And sometimes if we do that, we might end up just being a little bit surprised. I thought my motivation was higher, more supernatural. But really, it could be just like these people racing across the lake to catch up with Jesus, just enthusiastic about a big meal. Jesus tells them, and he tells you, and he tells me, not to do that, not to fall into that trap. Because what he tells the Jews that had caught up with him, do not work for food that cannot last, but work for food that endures to eternal life. So much of the food that you and I find ourselves working for, really enthusiastically perhaps, is food that cannot last. Sure, we need food, we need bread and so on, but not as our ultimate motivation. And so the great danger is that the bread or the glory or the fame or the popularity or just the money would be my ultimate motivation, my ultimate goal. And if that is the case, well then eventually, sooner or later, we will end up with our hands empty, saying to ourselves, that was not worth the effort. Only eternal, lasting goals are worth it. Only they can be the true motivation. And so it is something that we do, kind of have to be sincere. What motivates me? There's a story told by the famous French painter Henri Matisse. Well, I don't know much about him, but I don't think he was much of a believer. But he did have a very good friend who was a nun, Sister Jacques Marie. And he knew her before she became a nun. He was a bit shocked, I think, by the very fact she became a nun. But she was involved in the decoration of a chapel that her order had. And she got Henri, her old friend, Henri Matisse, to paint it for her. And at the end of it, he said something a bit strange. Seeing his masterpiece, and it's generally believed to be a great masterpiece, the Chapel of the Rosary in Venice, he said to her, maybe he was just teasing, but he said, this work was for me. And Sister Jacques Marie was a bit surprised by that. And she said to him, but you told me you were doing it for God. God was your motivation, not yourself. And Matisse replied, yes, but I am God. So, very strange. But in a certain sense, that's it. Our motivation is either God or something else which is not worthwhile. Think of the apostles, the martyrs, all the saints who've ever lived throughout the history of the church. In everything they did in their lives, we find very motivated people. In other words, doing things for the glory of God, ultimately, as our ultimate motivation, is not a poor motivation. Not like I only get really motivated if I'm looking for money or for popularity or something. No, the greatest, they show us that actually the greatest motivation and the most enduring motivation is doing things for the love of God, even in very ordinary lives. That it is actually truly motivating. We're not kind of, oh, well, I can't really be motivated because I'm doing this for God. No, it is the one true motivation, that food that lasts for eternity, that endures to eternal life, as Jesus says. Let's ask Jesus as we finish this time of prayer, Lord, help me to purify my motivations. Have what we call rectitude of intention, that I wouldn't be doing this thinking like Matisse, I am God. I want this all everything, my prayer this morning, the day that faces me today, everything that I would do would ultimately be motivated by love for you. I give you thanks, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask you for help to put them into effect. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.